this is pretty amazing. And in some respects, I got to say, a little bit scary. The prime ministers of Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovenia are going to be meeting with Zelinskyy, the president of Ukraine, today in Kyiv. And Kyiv apparently was like getting bombed through the night. I think there was a half dozen people or so who died.
Targeting residential areas, apartment buildings.
Of course, that seems to be basically, and no one seems to be refuting that, and nobody seems at this point to be shocked. This seems to be the plan. And, but it is a scary prospect. You have NATO leaders, or I should say, leaders of countries that are in NATO heading to a war zone, because that opens up the potential of the Russians being able to widen this conflict. It also suggests that Kyiv still, now weeks, you could say, I think, into this conflict, is relatively safe. So we will see. But what is really interesting is what's happening, and we've seen multiple videos over the past couple of days of what's happening in Russia. This just came across the transom, as it were. A former worker, and it's unclear how she got into the studio. But she's a former, or maybe she's just former after she did this. I'm not quite sure. But she's a former Channel 1 Russia staffer. Her name is Marina Ovsyannikova. And this is what she did in the middle of a newscast, I guess.
Insanely brave.
Just yesterday.
О том, как смягчить воздействие западных санкций, говорил сегодня Михаил Мишустин. На встрече со своим белорусским коллегой российский премьер подчеркнул, надо усилить сотрудничество в рамках союзного государства, а на совещании в правительстве обсуждали, как сохранить доступность лекарств.
And you see, they just cut away to some other clip, apparently. What was also amazing, the newscaster didn't seem to even bat an eye.
I know, right? She just kept going.
And then put up the, she released a recorded statement.
It's in Russian, obviously. So this is
Russian,
the translation.
The translation is what is happening in Ukraine right now. And she released this, we should say, timed with what she did on the television, because I think she probably knew that she would end up being detained or arrested. Do we know?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's information on that, but there's a law that could be used to imprison her that would allow for up to 15 years in prison. So just like to underscore how brave this is.
She wrote, what is happening in Ukraine right now is a crime, and Russia is the aggressor country. The responsibility for this aggression lies on the conscience of only one person. That person is Vladimir Putin. This is important because we saw yesterday that clip of the Belarusian president basically saying to Putin, meeting with Putin and saying to him, for the sake of domestic consumption, I would imagine in Belarus and in Russia, we had no choice here. We were really just striking back. Marina writes, my father is Ukrainian, my mother is Russian. They have never been enemies. This necklace on my neck is like a symbol for the need for Russia to immediately stop this fratricidal war. Our brotherly people can still make peace. Unfortunately, during these past years, I have been working at Channel 1 involved in Kremlin propaganda. I am very ashamed of this. Ashamed because I allowed lies to be told from the TV screen. Ashamed because I allowed the Russian people to be turned into zombies. We stayed silent in 2014 when all of this was just starting. We did not go to protests when the Kremlin poisoned Navalny. We just silently observed this anti-human regime. Right now, the whole world has turned away from us. 10 generations of our descendants will not be able to wash the shame of this fratricidal war. We are Russian people and thinking and smart people. Only we have the power to stop this madness. Go protest. Do not be afraid. They cannot put us all in jail. I mean, this is, it's pretty brave.
Really brave. There's a great piece in Jacobin that I'd encourage everybody to read that came out a few days ago from a Russian anti-war activist, Alexei Sakin. Again, I'm sorry for butchering it, called Vladimir Putin's War Spreads Resignation and Despair Among Ordinary Russians. And, 1/3 of Russians have a relative in Ukraine. So the suppression of the real stakes and the real immorality of this war, it can't last forever, but it's happening now for anti-war protests in Russia. And this was like an incredibly brave act, but there's a reason that they're going to try to crack down hard on her, most likely, because you have to suppress this in order to maintain a certain level of I guess, disinformation, so the war can continue.
Jack Crosby, who was on the program yesterday, upon his return from Ukraine, said that he was, I think he was in Ukraine and watching people call their relatives or their friends, their grandmother, I think he said at one point, in Russia, as bombs were falling. I think this was when he was in Kyiv, and the grandmother in Russia did not believe that the bombs were there. I mean,
very similar anecdote in this piece too. Yep. Yeah, I mean, they've basically branded it as a special military operation, and it's going to take a while for there to be cracks in that. But the cracks will come. There just needs to be persistence, obviously, but that requires bravery of people like that.
And this woman here too. She is a Russian climate activist, Vlada Zuralovia. I'm not doing well with that name either, frankly. And she put this on a video onto Twitter. And again, these in a situation where there is such a tight control on information, these type of things become highly, highly damaging to Putin's project and to, as Jack said yesterday on the program, he felt that he didn't think that Russian society would recover from this, or at least as we know it. And here's this from Twitter, and for those, I guess we could read it for those who are just listening.
Hello, my name is Vlada, and before the 24th of February, I was a climate activist from the Fridays for Future Russia. Now I left my climate activism to concentrate on the anti-war action. Now I'm going to distribute anti-war leaflets, and even by this action, I have some risks to be detained by the Russian police. Unfortunately, the anti-war movement in Russia is being oppressed by Putin's autocratic regime. People are illegally detained at anti-war rallies, then fined or sent to a temporary detention center. In police departments, people are beaten, mentally pressured, and some are subjected to physical and sexual torture. We are forbidden to say the word war. Russia's actions can only be called a special operation. For the phrase "no to war," you can get up to 15 years in prison. I'm very glad that I was not subjected to repressions, but I still fear for my friends in Russia who are risking everything they have to fight the horror that Putin has made in Ukraine. And I'm afraid for my friends in Ukraine, for whom every exit from the bomb shelter can be fatal. In such situations, Russians usually say that this war is Putin's fault, not ordinary people's. I believe that this war is really not my fault, but it is still my responsibility. Therefore, I want to appeal to everyone who hears me now. Journalists, give a voice to the victims of tortures in Russian police departments. Give a voice to everyone who suffered from this regime. And first of all, to the Ukrainians who simply wanted to live in peace on their own land. Politicians and activists in Europe, remember that your governments are still buying fossil fuels from Russia. Now, it's not oil that flows through your pipes, but the blood of Ukraine.
And this obviously, she's doing this in English. She's appealing, and I suspect she's outside Russia at this point.
I hope.
But doing this to, I guess, get the Europeans to cut off their oil purchases from Russia, dovetails with their climate activism, and to inspire, journalists, like she said, to go and cover what's happening in terms of the Ukrainians. We also have a clip of a woman who's holding up a sign. I think I mentioned this yesterday, but put this up. This is simply a sign. Was this the thing that had no words on it? Here we go.
So she's holding up a blank
sign, and immediately for holding up a sign, taken away by Russian police.
But this is why,
and this is happening. I've seen other videos too, where people have done similar things, and the police are they're there. People are doing this. They know exactly that they're going to get
this when you were on
arrested.
vacation too, like an elderly anti-war activist who was arrested. But this is why blanket blame of Russians in general isn't just xenophobic, like that we're seeing from some in the liberal press here in the West. It's also really counterproductive, because there needs to be as much outside support for Russians who are dissenting in the country that we can possibly provide. So solidarity with the Russian left and the protesters there, because they're the amount of bravery that this takes, as has been outlined already on the show, is massive.
Right. Some of the things where you see, like, I think at one point or a week or so ago, a Canadian orchestra or symphony canceled the appearance of a Canadian. I don't know if it was a violinist. I think it was. A Russian violinist. These type of things are a little bit absurd. It's one thing to operate a boycott for members of Russian society who are helping prop up or the Putin regime, or or are in some way aiding the invasion of Ukraine. But very hard to reconcile the idea that Putin is an autocratic leader, and also you're going to hold random Russians responsible for what this autocratic leader does. Certainly, theoretically, we have far more responsibility for things like the atrocities that are taking place in Yemen and the misery that is being created in Afghanistan than your average Russian citizen has for what is taking place in Ukraine. And so people should keep that in mind. Both ends of that, frankly.